Cairo, the beating heart of the Arab world, has once again placed itself at the center of international diplomacy. On September 9th, 2025, Egypt's foreign minister welcomed a new cooperation framework between Iran and the United Nations nuclear watchdog, a development that many hope could ease years of tension surrounding Tehran's nuclear ambitions. Standing before reporters in Cairo, Foreign Minister Badr Abdelatty laid out Egypt's hopes for what this framework could achieve. In his own words, "We hope that this agreement opens the door to additional steps to avoid escalation and bring views closer with the three European countries, which will enable an understanding that leads to the return of negotiations between Iran and the United States, which paves the way for a comprehensive, satisfactory and sustainable agreement on the Iranian nuclear issue, which will achieve regional and international security and stability." With these words, Abdelatty highlighted the stakes. Egypt views this framework not merely as a technical step with the International Atomic Energy Agency, but as a potential turning point, one that could bring Europe, the United States and Iran back to the negotiating table. His emphasis on the three European countries, the so-called E3, France, Germany and the United Kingdom, underscores the hope that Europe can act as a diplomatic bridge at a moment when trust is in short supply. For more than 2 decades, the Iranian nuclear issue has dominated Middle Eastern and international security discussions. The 2015 nuclear deal, formerly known as the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, was hailed as a breakthrough. For a time, it promised to restrict Iran's enrichment activities in exchange for sanctions relief, yet its unraveling after the US withdrawal in 2018 and Iran's subsequent resumption of nuclear advances has fueled fears of a regional arms race and a collapse in global trust. Egypt's message today is clear: restoring dialogue is essential. Abdelatty's statement was not just a reflection of Egyptian diplomacy, but also a subtle reminder of Egypt's own ambitions to be seen as a mediator in global conflicts. For Cairo, stability in the Persian Gulf is not a distant issue. It is a matter directly tied to its own national security, economic well-being, and regional influence. The historical backdrop to these negotiations is one of repeated failure and fragile progress. Since the collapse of the original nuclear deal, multiple attempts to revive talks have ended in deadlock. In Vienna, under the Biden administration, diplomats came close to stitching together a new framework. But deep disagreements over sanctions relief, Tehran's ballistic missile program, and its role in regional conflicts stalled the process. For Egypt, which has long positioned itself as a balancing voice in the Arab world, the Iran-IAEA cooperation framework represents one of the few positive steps forward in recent years. Its welcome is not accidental. By backing the process, Cairo sends a signal that it supports diplomatic solutions over confrontation and that it intends to remain an active participant in the global conversation on security. The regional stakes cannot be underestimated. For Israel, Iran's nuclear program represents an existential threat. Israeli leaders have warned repeatedly that they will not tolerate Tehran's progress toward enrichment levels close to weapons-grade capacity. At the same time, Saudi Arabia and other Gulf states, already uneasy about Iran's growing influence across the region, fear both the security risks and the economic consequences of escalating confrontation. Egypt's role here is unique. It sits at the crossroads of Africa, the Middle East, and the Mediterranean, giving it both a strategic location and diplomatic weight. A nuclear crisis in the Gulf is not just about regional politics. It would impact shipping through the Suez Canal, energy markets across the world, and Egypt's own fragile economy. Cairo has every reason to welcome steps that lower the temperature. The United States remains the indispensable player in this equation. Abdelatty's remarks were careful but explicit. A sustainable agreement requires Washington's involvement. For decades, mistrust has defined U.S. Iran relations. From the hostage crisis of 1979 to the cycles of sanctions and threats in the 21st century, yet no meaningful deal on Iran's nuclear program can be struck without U.S. engagement. Cairo's statement is as much a reminder to Washington as it is a message to Tehran. For the International Atomic Energy Agency, the agreement represents an opportunity to restore a level of trust and technical oversight. Inspectors have long raised concerns about access to Iranian facilities and transparency regarding enrichment activities. A cooperative framework, if fully implemented, would allow the IAEA to resume its role as the world's nuclear watchdog with greater authority and credibility. The wider diplomatic landscape is also in play. At the United Nations, non-proliferation remains a pillar of international security. Egypt's warm reception of this deal reflects its broader strategy of aligning with global consensus, projecting itself as a responsible actor, and signalling to allies in both the West and the Arab world that it stands on the side of stability. Observers note that Cairo's words carry weight at a sensitive time. Across the Middle East, wars in Gaza and Syria continue to destabilize communities. The rivalry between regional powers adds layers of complexity to any negotiation with Tehran. Yet Abdelatty's tone was deliberately optimistic. His choice of words, comprehensive, satisfactory, and sustainable, offered a vision not of compromise, but of a solution that could endure beyond the shifting winds of politics. The significance of Egypt's support also lies in its timing. Just months ago, tensions between Iran and Western nations had reached new highs, with threats of additional sanctions, military posturing, and growing mistrust. Against that backdrop, Egypt's message was a call for de-escalation. It is not a guarantee of success, but it is a reminder that the region itself is demanding solutions, not just watching from the sidelines. As the press conference drew to a close, Abdelatty left no doubt about Egypt's stance. The future must be shaped at the negotiating table, not on the battlefield. For Cairo, the goal is nothing less than securing peace in a volatile region, while ensuring that the nuclear issue does not spiral into a new crisis that the world cannot afford. The coming months will reveal whether this framework with the IAEA can be the first step toward a broader agreement. Will Iran and the United States find the political will to return to negotiations? Will Europe manage to bridge the divide? And will regional powers accept a path forward that balances security with diplomacy? Egypt, for its part, has made its choice. By welcoming this agreement, it has chosen optimism and placed its weight behind a fragile but vital process that could reshape not only the future of Iran's nuclear program, but the entire balance of power in the Middle East. We hope that this agreement opens the door to additional steps to avoid escalation and bring views closer with the three European countries, E3, which will enable an understanding that leads to the return of negotiations between Iran and the United States, which paves the way for a comprehensive, satisfactory and sustainable agreement on the Iranian nuclear issue, which will achieve regional and international security and stability.